We're talking today with Mr. Howard VanSolkema of Byron Center, Michigan. The interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Mr. VanSolkema, can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself? To begin with, where and when were you born?
I was born in Butterworth Hospital in Grand Rapids, and I've lived my whole life in Byron Center.
Okay, and what year were you born?
1950.
All right, and what did your family do?
My father he owned a carpet store, and my mother worked with him. We lived in the 72nd Byron Center Road area. That's where I grew up till I went into service.
Okay, now did you finish high school?
Yes, I went to Byron High School. I graduated in, 1968.
All right, and then did you work while you were in high school or when you got out?
Yeah, I worked in muck fields, when I was young. And after high school, I worked for my father, and I worked a little bit at Dexter Lot prior to service.
All right. Now, before you got your draft notice, were you paying much attention to what was going on around you with the war, Vietnam War going on and that kind of thing?
Yes.
And did you expect you'd probably get drafted?
Yes. I didn't go to college, and it already had happened to a lot of classmates. So.
Okay. And then when did your draft notice show up?
December of 1968.
Okay. And then where did you have to report, or what did you have to do once you got the notice?
In January, I had to go down for a physical down to Detroit. And that's when they passed me in the physical, and I opted for the 2-year program in the Marines versus the Army.
Okay. Were they giving you kind of an assortment of choices once you got there? They didn't automatically just put you in the Army or something?
No. We had the Naval had a 2-year program, a Naval Reserve program, I think they call it. They put it, but then you had to have 4 years of meetings.
Meetings? Mean like with reserves or whatever, once you were back?
Reserve meetings. And then Army was 2 years, and you were done. The Marines were 2 years and done. And I had a lot of family members that were Marines, so I kind of wasn't scared of going in that.
Okay. And had they told you something about what Marine training was like, or what it meant to be a Marine?
Yes.
All right.
That's why I thought, it'd be tougher.
But you had some idea of what to expect, at least.
Yep.
Or at least you thought you did. Now, where did they send you then for basic training?
I went to San Diego, California. I had basic training there. My second training was in Camp Pendleton.
All right, let's go back to the basic training here. How were you greeted when you got to the base at San Diego?
The yellow footprints and the haircuts and the loud drill instructors.
Okay, explain the yellow footprints. What are those?
Well, when you arrive in San Diego, they bring you in by bus, and then they have you get off that bus in a hurry and find a set of yellow footprints real fast.
Right.
And that's just part of the first day of training.
So you're standing there on the footprints in basically whatever formation the footprints have you in,
Yes.
and then they start, are they explaining things to you, yelling things at you?
Yelling.
All right.
And you better start listening.
Okay. How tough was the conditioning process? How much of a workout did you get?
We had our platoon, which was I Company 3018. We were a test platoon.
Okay.
And so they, like during PT, the other platoons could wear tennis shoes, but our platoon had to wear our boots all the time. In fact, instead of getting 2 sets of boots, we got 3 sets of boots because we were using them constantly. And the end result was we were a lot stronger. Our legs got a lot stronger.
Because you had to lift more weight? Was
Yeah.
that the...
When we did our PT and our runs. And
Okay. Now, what was the point of having you wear the boots? Were you testing the boots? Were they testing the effect of the boots?
I think they were looking at everything from feet. You know, the government looks at things, or the service looks
Right.
at things a lot different than,
Yeah, and then they care about what happened to your feet.
yeah,
Really.
oh, definitely.
All right. Now, besides, so did you do a lot of marching? Is that part of it? Or did
Yeah,
you
we
go on
learned
long
drill.
hikes or?
No, not in boot camp. We did a lot of running. Before breakfast, we would, of course, be out running around, and then we'd change out of our PT shorts into our dungarees, and then went to breakfast. And then from there on, it was we had classes on different things. A lot of drill, a lot of marching. You march between classes, and then that's where you learn your skills of your weapon. And
All right. What kind of weapons training did you get at that point? Was it just basically with rifle and?
yep, it was basically an M14. That's what we carried, disassembly, and
All right. And you mentioned classes. I mean, like sit down in the classroom type classes?
yes, we had quite a few of them. We had, there's a lot to learn. Not only about your weapons, but you learn about your history, the Marine Corps history. There's medical stuff that you got to learn. There's, what to do when a situation's this way and that way, and it teaches you all the basics of the military.
Right. Okay. Now, how well did you adjust to the discipline? Did you respond pretty quickly to that?
I didn't have any really problem with it. My background probably helped a lot.
Were there other people who had more trouble with it?
Yes, there was a lot of people that had trouble with it.
Now, the guys that you were in with, were they mostly draftees at that point, or were there a lot of people who had volunteered?
Well, it was, we had a mixture. We had reservists, guys that were just going for training, and then they would go back to their units.
Right.
We had guys that might have gotten in trouble with the law, and I think they had a little bit more harder problems than what a country bumpkin like me would.
All right. What kind of ethnic mix was there? And did you have black and Hispanic soldiers in there? Were they mostly white?
Yeah, we had a majority of boot camp was, we were out of Michigan and New York and out of Texas, and mostly white. And a lot of them were 3- and 4-year enlistees also. So a 2-year guy was kind of, different. I was probably the minority. There was more reservists and more 3- and 4-year enlistees.
Okay. So you have a fairly substantial number of people who had volunteered and weren't simply
yes.
ones who
Yes.
had been drafted. Okay. Now, once you complete the basic training and then you move on to advanced training, then describe that a little bit.
Well, at basic training, you get your MOS, it's called. And mine was 0300, which was infantry.
Okay.
Then when you go up to your advanced training, they categorize you. And I was a machine gunner, 0331. That's
All
what
right.
I trained with.
Okay. Now, is that a 30 caliber machine gun or?
Yeah, that's a 7.62 millimeter. It's a 308
Okay.
type.
Right. Now, was it, so it's a more advanced model and stuff they had in World War II in Korea? Was it a more recent one?
Yeah, it was an M60 machine gun.
Okay.
Yeah, more advanced than the old 30 caliber that they had in World War II.
All right. Now, did you train on any other weapons as well besides a rifle?
Yes. In AIT, you train with every weapon. Bazookas. They had a weapon called the Law. It's like a bazooka. I didn't go into any mortar training, but all small arms training, 45s. 45 was my other weapon. I carried a 45.
So you carried a pistol as well as the,
Yeah.
the machine gun. All right. Now, in what ways was the advanced training different from basic? I mean, the content's a little bit different, obviously, because you're getting the more specialized stuff. Was there as much emphasis on drill and discipline otherwise? Are you going to stay in the same format, or did they assume you knew what you were doing now?
Well, we really didn't have much drill, but when we did march as a unit, we marched as drill. But the training was in the hills and high ground in California. Camp Pendleton, and there was a lot of high hills there.
All right. So you spent a lot of overnights out in the hills and things like that. Were you camping out there, or mostly still back in the barracks?
Majority of the time was back in the barracks, but we did have a deal where it took us out. I think we spent 3 days or something out in the field.
All right. Now, were people who were your instructors at this point, were some of these people now Vietnam veterans?
Yes, they were all Vietnam veterans.
Okay. And did they tell you much about what it was like over there or what they had experienced?
That's what they didn't really tell you about it, but they instilled the training, the types of training that you would need to. They knew what was going on, and the booby trap training and this and that. They would tell you what to look for, and when you made a mistake, they would tell you also.
All right. Now, at the stage when you're in advanced training, have you gotten any opportunities yet to go off base at all? Do you get any free time, or is it still all regimented?
Yeah, we did. We got to go to, there was a town there called Oceanside, and then they would give us liberty on Sunday to go over, and they had movie theaters and different things like that. But we weren't old enough to go to bars or doing any of that stuff yet.
All right. Now, how long does the advanced infantry training go on?
I think, well, I went to a second training there, and that was called BITS, and it's called basic infantry training, but that's where they really hone your skills. You know, I think I was in for like a month in ITR, and I think another 2 weeks or 3 weeks in BITS.
When you say hone your skills, what in particular were you working on at that point?
That's where you're constantly carrying your gun, your machine gun. You're constantly on the move. You're up around there, which all the Marines, there was trails. I mean, we followed the trails the other Marines went. But then they hone you towards booby trapping and different things you can run into, and the problems you can have with your gun.
Okay.
You know.
Now, with this gun, did you need a loader as well? Were you a two-man crew?
Yeah, the second guy was an ammo carrier. You know, that his job was to keep you supplied. But we were all machine gunners. The ammo carriers is what we did for another guy. They switched us back and forth.
So you do both roles?
Yeah,
All right.
both roles.
So you weren't the same team all of the time. You'd work with different people. Okay. Now, at this point, is the expectation that when you finish this, you'll be sent off and you'll be replacements in different units, or rather than going as a company or whatever someplace?
Yep. The next step was to leave home. And then I went home for the first time. And then I was to report to was called LTA at Santa Ana, California.
And what is that?
That's where they had the blimps during World War II.
Mm-hmm.
They had two huge domes. They're still there.
Mm-hmm.
And they were one of them was so huge, it had its own atmosphere. It could rain in there.
Mm-hmm.
And the doors, when the doors were fully open, 4 helicopters could fly abreast through it.
Wow. All right.
It was
now,
a big building.
Now, was this kind of a staging area or a place where they prepared you to ship out, or did you get more training there?
I got more training there, but what it was I thought I was going to spend the rest of my tour there.
Mm-hmm.
It was a regular base.
Okay.
And I was assigned first to the gate at like an MP.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had a lot of guys on that base that were Vietnam veterans that had already come back,
Mm-hmm.
and they were spending the rest of their time out. So they had plenty of MPs. So then they threw me in the mess hall for quite a while. It's like they didn't know what to do with me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I run into a guy, and he said that they needed somebody at the headquarters building. And so I went up there and talked to them. What they needed was a guy at night to check in people for leaves and this and that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a 12-hour shift, and I really didn't know too many people, and so I took that, I got that position there. And then when the headquarters building, they would close up the main part, but then the entrance there, they would have an area for leave, and they had a bunk there and everything, television. So it wasn't bad duty there.
All right. Now, how was it then that you wind up leaving that position? Is that
Well, it was just I had a year left or so
mm-hmm.
in the service, and then I was going to take another leave. In fact, I took another leave, and when I was on leave, I got orders from up that I was going to Westpac. That's means Vietnam or Okinawa or Japan.
All right. Now, on leave, would you just go back home? Was that what you did? Or?
Yeah, I went back home, and then I was able to stay another, I think 10 days at home before I had to report back to Camp Pendleton for staging.
Mm-hmm.
Battalion.
Now, how did your family feel about your being in the Marines at this point? I mean, were they worrying about what might happen to you, or?
I don't think they were worried too much. We got, I would call every Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And but then when I went overseas, I think my mom worried quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, describe the trip overseas. How do they get you over across the Pacific? Do they fly you over?
Yeah. There was a couple different ways of going. One of them was if you took, like the Air Force had something big going over,
Mm-hmm.
or the way I went was with Seaboard World West.
What was that?
And that was an old Boeing 707 that they gutted out.
Mm-hmm.
And you had folding chairs. You carried your own folding chair. It wasn't gutted out. Kind of a mess.
Now, could that fly all the way across the Pacific, or did they have to stop?
We stopped in Alaska, and they refueled and checked everything over. That took a couple hours. And then we flew to Japan, and then from Japan we went to Okinawa. And that's when I knew I was going to Vietnam. We
Mm-hmm.
didn't know if we were going to stay in Okinawa. Nobody knew, but then the orders, they call it down south, going
Mm-hmm.
down south.
Right. Now, did you spend any amount of time in Okinawa, or just a few hours, or?
Well, the guys that were going down south had to keep their gear together, and what they did was they took your gear and they gave anybody going south, they gave them camo, this and that. We had no weapons, no anything else. We stored our gear in Okinawa. Otherwise, if we'd have stayed in Okinawa, then you'd be assigned someplace and use your gear. And then,
All right. So you're being sent to Vietnam. Now, do you know at this point what unit you're going to join, or does that come later?
that comes
All right.
later.
Okay, so you're still basically going over there essentially as reported.
Yep.
All right.
You're kind of in the dark. I was assigned to 1st Marine Division, which was located in Da Nang. But as far as assignments, I didn't know.
All right. Now, from Okinawa then, did you go directly to, did you fly into Da Nang or did you go someplace else?
No, we flew into Da Nang.
All right. Now, what was your first impression when you got there and got off the airplane? What was that like at that point?
That place smelled, and it was hot. It just stunk down that city area. That terrible smell.
Now, you get off the plane and so forth. Now, do they take you off to barracks someplace? Where do you go once you get off the plane?
Well, we landed there about, I don't know, maybe it'd be 9 in the morning or something. And we got off the tarmac there. We flew from there with a commercial airline from Okinawa to Vietnam. It wasn't the same 707.
Right.
And that was, when we left that morning, it was dark in Okinawa, and when we got to Vietnam, it was light. I think it was like a 4-hour flight or a 3-hour flight, maybe less. And then we landed in country, and it was extremely hot for that time in the morning. And it was just something that it was kind of like a shock, you know.
Now, what was your first indication that you were going into a war zone? And was there any signs there, even there when you landed at Da Nang, or does that come later where you really see it?
Well, you got to kind of understand, I was a machine gunner, and I was landing in Da Nang. It kind of was obvious I was going to go somewhere, but I didn't know where.
But I mean, were there signs at Da Nang that, okay, this is a military thing and there's a war going on, or?
Oh yeah, when we got off the airplane, it was like getting off the bus at boot camp. You get off there in case something happens, you know. And you knew right then you were we had training on that, you know, staging and this and that, so we kind of knew. We still weren't scared or anything, though.
Right.
I mean, you never got shot till later.
Now, how long do you actually stay in Da Nang?
Before the sun was setting, I was already 23 miles, they said it was 23 miles southwest of Da Nang.
Okay. So you were being sent out to a particular unit at that point?
Yeah.
All right.
And
And how?
sent out to the 7th Marines.
Okay. And how were they getting you out there? Were you going in a truck?
Truck. We went by truck.
Okay.
They loaded us up.
Now, as you're going out there, I mean, what indications did you have that there was a war going on? I mean, did you see any evidence of fighting or anything like that had happened or anything like that? Or was it just a country road at that point?
It was a country road. The closer you got to, we went to a place called Landing Zone Baldy. And the closer you got there, you could see indications. There was some French bunkers and stuff, and different things that were all shot up, and you knew you were in there. And I just still didn't have a machine gun. The other guys had rifles, but I still didn't have a gun.
Didn't have your own weapon. All right. Now, when you get to Landing Zone Baldy, then what do? They assign you to a particular platoon, or?
Yeah, I was assigned to K Company 337.
Okay. And what was sort of the situation there when you got there? What was going on?
K-37 was protecting the base.
Okay.
1-7 and 2-7 were in the field.
And what were they doing? Were they patrolling or holding
Yeah, they were
positions?
patrolling, and you know, there was 2 rivers there, and or it was 2 names of a river, Long Song or whatever it is, river,
Okay.
and that's the basin where they were patrolling.
Right. Now, on the base, I mean, what did the base look like? I mean, how was it laid out?
Well, it had it was on top of a hill, of course, and it was all perimeter with sandbags filled bunkers and concertina wire.
Mm-hmm. So the barbed
Around the
wire,
edge.
yeah.
Around the edge. And
Did you have minefields around it too?
they had mines and claymores that were hand shot off type of mines that they would set out and move, net, check out.
Mm-hmm.
And flare mortars, different things like that around the edge of it.
Now, was this, what was your first night there like? Were you on guard duty or were you trying to sleep or what?
Well, we got there, and then what they did was they billeted us, and we had I got to go to a billet that was made by a carpenter. It had a floor up on it,
Mm-hmm.
and a mattress and the whole thing, but I still didn't have a machine gun. I still hadn't checked in or got that from the officer or from the commanding officer yet. And they didn't put us on the perimeter, but we did get hit that night. And they had a Ontos, they call it. It was a 106 tank, 106 millimeter tank. And they said they hadn't shot it in over a month at the enemy, and that thing was firing quite regular that night. So it was setting in.
Now, what were you being attacked? Was it mortar fire coming in, or were there people shooting into the
Well,
base?
yeah, what they would do is they'd probe. They'd hit with RPGs and try to hit them bunkers and mortars. Not much small arms, but they would hit and run, try to cause casualties.
Right. And what was the response to that? Did you try to saturate an area with fire, or?
Well, they would flare it and try to, artillery it. They would try to hit as good as what they could with RD, and they had their mortars too. We had mortars.
Mm-hmm. But you had to figure out where the enemy was in the first place, and if they were moving, then that can be fairly tricky. Now, did they do any damage when they attacked that first night? Did anybody get hit?
I really don't know as far as that, because everything was organized way beyond what I knew what was going on.
You knew at that time.
I was still hunkered down in a bunker that night.
All right. Now, how long was it before you got a machine gun?
The next morning,
All right.
that we were geared up.
Now, what was the condition of the platoon that you joined? Were they low on men, or were they pretty much full strength? Or
No, they were low on men. I think the regular company would be about 200 guys. I think ours was about 100.
Mm-hmm. All right. And did you have officers or sergeants or whatever who were pretty experienced and knew what they were doing?
Yeah, but they were quiet too. I mean, if they told you something, you better listen.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Were they basically trying to teach the new guys stuff they were going to have to know, or they were just going to let you figure that out for yourself?
Well, the first phase is the amount of work you do when you're in the field.
Mm-hmm.
And that teaches you that when somebody talks, you listen, because like when you first get there, you can't drink enough water, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and you can get a gut ache from salt tablets, and you just try to keep up, but then pretty soon your body gets worked up, you know, worked
Mhm.
into the system, and,
Right.
and in fact, I don't really remember too much of a lot of that, just how much work it was.
Mhm. Okay. How long was it before you had to go out in the field yourself?
Well, with 1-7 and 2-7 was out,
Mm-hmm.
and then we went on a sweep where we joined them, and the South Vietnamese Marines, I think, came in and took over our base,
Mm-hmm.
and then we went on a sweep or operation, and we were out there for 40 days, or over 40 days
Okay.
in the field.
Now, what was the terrain like there? Was it jungle or
Yeah,
hills
it was-
or?
Everything had growth on it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everything had cover, and there was like valleys and hills, and you pretty much, you know, like when I was first there, I didn't have no ranks, so I really didn't know what was going on in the radio behind anything. Or
Mm-hmm.
what was behind the scenes is you're just out there.
Yeah, you're just going where they tell you to
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
All right.
And doing what they tell you to do.
Now, on a sweep, was the idea to kind of have enough force within a given area to be able to move through it and try to find any enemy
Right.
soldiers and chase
Encampments,
them out? Mm-hmm.
materials. We, on that one sweep, a guy down on one of the river edges there, he found some rifles that was in the bank.
Mm-hmm.
The scuttlebutt was that he had went into the river to cool off and happened to catch one of them, something on his pants or something like
Mhm.
that. And then we had to stop right there at that point and then set up perimeters, and then they brought in the engineers and they started finding weapons caches and
Mhm.
rice, and
Now,
that was part of the big sweep that we had.
right, so the idea was if they have supplies stored in places, the men themselves might leave or get out of your way
Well,
or whatever.
they knew exactly what we were doing all
Mhm.
the time.
Mhm.
You can't, yeah, it ain't like you think it is. You know, when you have casualties, there's helicopters going in and out, supply trucks coming in and out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there was no front line there, but
Right.
you know, to cover that type of activity, so they basically knew what we were doing most of the time.
Now, would they try to attack you at night or to pick off the helicopters or the trucks or anything like that?
Yes, they would. That was the ambushing, booby traps,
Mhm.
this type of thing. That was their style of going to war, to have as many casualties
Mm-hmm.
and thing as possible. And you know, it would. They tried to break the morale of the troops.
Right. Now, about when is this? Are we into 1970 yet, or is it still 69? Or
No, this was in 1970. I went over, in 71 I came home.
Okay. So by then, Nixon has been in office for a while.
The Marines were on their way out.
Mm-hmm.
The first group to go was the 9th Marines, and then the 7th Marines were next, or one of the next on the list.
Mm-hmm. So on some level, the Vietnamese who were fighting against you could have a sense that maybe they're kind of getting their way or they're accomplishing what they were trying to accomplish.
Yep.
All right. Now, how effective were you at this point, or were the Marines at this point, at avoiding the ambushes and the booby traps and so forth? Had they learned enough about how the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese operated that they didn't fall for a lot of that, or were you still just taking casualties that way as you moved?
Well, they were very good at it. They figured out different ways of doing it. They didn't just do certain things all the time. They were very genuine ingenuity. They had a lot of ingenuity as far as stuff, and the way they attacked was different every time. There was no rhyme or reason.
Okay, so what you had learned before doesn't necessarily help you the next time.
Yeah.
Okay, now was your company or platoon taking casualties as you were going? Were people being hit or shot at, or did you mostly stay together?
We had in the year that I was there, or it wasn't quite a year, but we pretty much had that area cleaned up. It later on, they back infiltrated and got back in there, but there wasn't. We didn't have casualties like they did in the years earlier.
Right. So on some level, what they're doing is at least working better probably than some of the earlier kinds of tactics that they used. Or at least you've done well enough already that the Vietnamese were not choosing to fight you there.
They picked where they wanted to have it out, but we never really did. I never really was in a big battle. It was always just small skirmishes here and there.
Now, while you were out in the field, did you ever actually see anything of the enemy?
Oh yeah.
Okay. And were they, as far as you can tell, were they North Vietnamese soldiers, or were they?
No, it was. We fought the North Vietnamese, and I believe some of them were Chinese too, because some of them were 6 foot tall, and that's a big person.
Well, it's a big person for the Chinese too.
Yeah, but yeah, they were pretty big. Some of them were pretty big, and that would be casualties that they took. What I see.
Okay. Now, were they wearing North Vietnamese uniforms?
Yeah, they were wearing North Vietnamese uniforms. A lot of them had, paperwork on them to, ID,
right,
tags, different things like that.
Okay. So at this point, there's not a whole lot of evidence of sort of Viet Cong or people who were South Vietnamese who hadn't been joining the North Vietnamese army.
Well, they could have been South Vietnamese, but the South Vietnamese or the Viet Cong, they were kind of a community-oriented type backstabbing outfit that, through their communications and through their network of getting supplies different places, we didn't really run into too much of that.
Okay. Were you in an area that had, were there villages and things that you went through? Was there still a civilian population there, or was it mostly empty?
No, the civilian population was there. The closer you got to Da Nang, the bigger the villages were, but there was villages out in different areas. But the villagers there kind of had to go with who was walking through as number one. If the North Vietnamese were walking through, they were number one.
Right.
Or they didn't have to fear us for doing anything to them, but they had to fear them because they would take something out. They were nasty to their people.
Yeah.
Very nasty.
Yeah. I mean, they used terror as a means of maintaining as much control as they could in the countryside, so that was part of the package. Now, did you get to go into Da Nang at all itself? I mean, did you get liberty or whatever where you could go off base, or did you mostly just stay with your unit the whole time you were out there?
When I was with the 7th Marines, we were southwest of Da Nang and west of Da Nang, and then they were winding up to pull out home in the fall of 70.
Yeah.
And then I was transferred to the 5th Marines, which were up north. And that was the same type of territory, mountainous and plains and lowlands, but it was a little bit different than south. It wasn't so much, so many foothills and stuff. It was either big hills or a little bit different terrain, and some of it was nice flat farmland. Some of that
So it wasn't all jungle.
wasn't.
Yeah.
No.
And was it dry farmland or as opposed to
Well, it'd
rice
be
paddies?
rice.
Rice paddies, no. So that's
Dikes.
dikes and mud and that kind of thing. Now, in that area, was that second assignment, was that more dangerous than the first? Were there more enemy around or more
Well, I
fire?
think the chance of having a bigger group hit you, I think, was there. But we really never run into a regiment of them. They would always run from us.
Did you ever kind of basically walk into an ambush or part of a small unit that was in the wrong place? Well, what would happen with something like that? How would that work?
Well, like let's say, well, I can give you an example. We were pinned down we had, I think we had two companies. I think K Company and L Company. And L Company was ahead of us. Well, they shot off across the front of them. And then they had another guy in a position, and he started shooting at us, and we didn't have any casualties. Everybody was all right.
Now, were these riflemen or machine gunners? Or
They had, I believe they had I don't know how many there were, but they had AK-47s and machine guns up there. And we were in a perfect position to get ambushed.
Right.
But there was no casualties yet. And anytime anybody tried to move, someone was going to get hit if we tried to do anything. We were in a perfect bad spot.
And what do you do when you're in a bad spot like that? Can you radio in for air
Well, that's
support or
what
something?
we called in artillery, and they said, no, we can't do it because we have a chance of hitting you guys where they're at. So then they called in a pair of helicopters, and they took, they were Cobras with miniguns on the front, and we tried to spot, or they spotted it for them. They just ground up the whole area with the miniguns. And
Did
so
that work?
everybody was standing up watching, and Cobras took off, and they started shooting again. Everybody was down, and we still didn't have any casualties. So then they took a inbound F4s that were off from a carrier, and they hit both spots precise. Navy pilots, right? And we never did find a machine gun or not. They hit it hard enough that it was gone, completely gone.
So either they got out of there or they were blasted out.
They didn't have any really way out of there.
Okay.
They were kind of,
It was sort of like holed up in caves or position or just tunnels
they
or
were in
something.
they had it carved out like that.
So you could find the place where they were.
Oh yeah,
But you
no,
just-
we couldn't find that either.
Okay.
Them bombs took the whole business.
All right. So yeah. Now, were there other situations where you just have to wait for it to get dark before you could get out, or normally
Well-
could you call in fire from someplace?
We could call in any type of arsenal at any time. That wasn't my job, but I seen napalm. I seen 500 pounders, and I seen a B-52 strike, which is later on in the thing. With the 5th Marines, I went to, we were up north, and then the South Vietnamese were setting up to go into Laos in January of '71. They did that offensive, and we were south of the main attack when they did it, and we were a backup unit. We weren't allowed to go towards Laos.
Right.
And then the B-52s just pounded. I mean, I don't know how anybody could live through a B-52 strike.
Well, some of them did. And if you're underground in the right place, maybe. But
But you'd have to lose your hearing or something. It well, I think we were 5 or more miles away, and the whole ground shook, and the noise was just like a roar.
Now, did you have any sense from your perspective of sort of how the war generally was going? As far as you could tell, were sort of the Americans and South Vietnamese holding their own, or gaining ground, or losing it, or?
Like I said earlier, we were in full control of that country. I think after that offensive in '68, they kind of broke their back before I arrived there. They had things under control real well.
Yeah, well, so it seemed to vary a lot depending on where one was in the country at the time, because there were places where there were some fairly effective attacks or real problems, and others where there wasn't much trouble at all. So some of it's sort of time and place.
Well, some of the units got hit hard. You know, it would be that I wasn't in a unit that got hit hard. Prior to me getting there, after the 40 days in the field, we went to LZ Ross, which was another base, and that was, I don't know, 10 miles away from LZ Baldy. And that had been overrun at one portion to where the Marines there really got hurt, and that was the 7th Marines also. So there, you know, but I just happened
to be in the right place at the right time.
Not to be there at that point.
Now, what rank were you by the time you finished in Vietnam?
I was a sergeant.
Okay. And were you leading a squad at that point, or what were you doing?
Well, there was one point where there was so few NCOs, and the officer corps was real light, and so was the enlisted men, real light. You know, I made one comment one time. At one time, I was in charge of 100 guys. You know, but maybe I wasn't. Just thought I was too. But.
So there were times when you could be leading unit effectively the size of the company just because you were the guy.
Well, taking care of,
you
know, everything from injuries, you know, to going on R&R. There's a million things to take care of when you got.
That's right. You got to keep track of everybody and everything.
Yeah.
Now, did you have a system where people were going in and out on rotation, so the men you start with go out and some new guys come in?
That's what we really had trouble with, was there was so many guys would be, you know, when a guy would leave for home, sometimes you'd get a new guy in it from the United States, and sometimes you'd get a guy from a unit that's getting close to going home because the unit is going home.
Right.
So we had a mixture of people. That's why when I was over there, I was never with a unit where I really got to be buddies with too many people, because it seemed like, you know, if you got to be buddy with him, he might be gone in a month or something. Right,
so, and as it was, the whole unit that you started with left, and so you're one of those guys who gets reassigned to another unit yourself.
Yeah, I was shipped up to the 5th Marines, and there it was all over again, you know.
Now, what sort of effect did that have on the effectiveness of the units themselves in terms of what they were able to do? Or
I think it was real tough for them, you know, because when you train with a unit, you know what everybody's like and what they're capable of and this and that. And when you get in that situation, you don't know what they're capable of. And then, you know, you got slackers and short timers and the new guys, they don't know what they're doing. And it's just a mixture of chaos.
And when they come in, you've got to figure them out to some extent, at least, if you have to look after them to some degree. Now, were there discipline problems? I mean, did you have people who were disobeying orders or doing other kinds of things to get in trouble, or by and large, did they do what they were supposed to?
I never experienced that too much. We did have a couple guys that didn't like each other, that type of thing. But as far as discipline, they could take away rank, they could ship you to the, ship you out. We really didn't have too much problem with that, but we didn't really, we really didn't, there was no base, basically, there was no nothing. You were on your own kind of to live,
And you were pretty much out in the field an awful lot of the time, and you were away from the larger towns or the bigger bases or things like that. Now, one of the sort of the stereotypes or whatever about Vietnam is that there were a lot of problems with drug abuse, racial tension, that sort of stuff, often away from the combat zones, much less than in it. Would that sort of fit your observation? I mean, where you were, you didn't have so much of that stuff?
Well, the base that I ended up at, Force Logistics Command, they had racial tension there. In fact, there was a grenade went off and, that type of thing. But we didn't have any fraggings or any of that stuff they say it.
Yeah.
I think it was, we were too tired, too hungry, too thirsty to worry about anything wrong.
Yeah.
We had other stuff to worry about.
Yeah, and if you are in contact with the enemy or fairly close to them, you kind of need each other.
Yeah.
And the rest of it goes elsewhere. Now, you mentioned being with Logistics Command. So at a certain point, do you move out of the line unit and into something else?
Well, the 5th Marines were getting set up to move. And I still had 2.5 months to go yet on my tour. So the 5th Marines were getting ready to load up, and I went to Force Logistics Command, which was a base. It's where the Marines originally landed in Vietnam, Red Beach.
And where was that in the country? Was it up north?
It was north of Da Nang.
Okay.
I don't know how many miles, 10 or 12 maybe. And then that was a supply base for the Army, the Marines, the Korean Marines, the Australians had an area. It was a big base. And what I did there was I was ahead of a section on the wire on the perimeter on the north side.
Okay, so you're guarding the base.
Yeah.
Now, in that position, was there much risk of attack or snipers or mortar barrages?
We did have sapper attacks. They would try to do different things, but not much. And when they tried, that base was set up to where it could take on a pretty good attack and fend it off. Of course, we were the first line of resistance, but there's more lines behind us.
Right. So not an easy place to infiltrate or sabotage or anything else like that.
Well, if they tried to sneak through, they could get through. But, and we had some of that happen, where they got into it, with explosives and stuff.
Okay. And were they able to do any damage that way, or did they get caught before
Just
that happened?
minimal damage, and then normally they were destroyed.
Was this an area where they were doing a lot of tunneling and so forth? Did they have a lot of stuff underground or anything like that?
No. This was, the water table there was with the ocean. So tunneling would be out of the
you
question.
couldn't really do that, so it was going to be more secure than some of the places inland as far as that stuff went. Now, did you see much of the troops who were not American, or the Australians or Koreans or whatever? Did you have any contact with them when you were working at this base?
At Force Logistics Command, the Australian guys, they wore like a cowboy hat. You could kind of pick them out, or their type of jungle hat, and they were funny guys. They talked funny. And, you tried to talk to them because they were just goofy. But no, I never became friends with anybody.
Right. What impression did you have of the South Vietnamese military? I mean, because you saw them here and there.
Yeah, they were really good, but they were really good when they had America's support. I mean, we worked out with them quite often. They would be in, operations and different things with us, and
Did you have the impression that the soldiers were properly trained and disciplined and that kind of thing?
Yeah, they had a different manner to them, you know, like guys would hold each other's hands and stuff, which we didn't do. And, you know, and they weren't very big guys, you know, so that always made you think they were inferior, but they were pretty tough individuals.
Of course, some of the ones you saw were Marines and so forth, and people who probably did have a little bit more training and discipline and that sort of thing. As far as you could tell, how did the civilian population view you guys, especially when you were kind of away from the combat zones?
Away from the combat zone?
Yeah, or at least, I mean, when you were, it was one thing to be in some of those villages where you were doing the sweep and so forth, and there were North Vietnamese around, and in other cases, there probably weren't as many if you were closer to the city or base or whatever. But in general, what sort of impression did you have of the civilians? Or
They liked us. They really liked us. It just, you know, but then maybe they liked the enemy too. So, but they seemed to like us.
Well, did you have them working on the bases and things like that? Were they doing stuff for you?
Oh yeah, they did all the, you know, like at Force Logistics Command, they did your laundry and they did the haircuts. They did, you know, they didn't let them do everything, but they let them do a lot of different things on the base. They were trustworthy people, and they were hard-working people.
Okay. Now, in general, was it sort of understood here that the Americans were kind of on their way out, at least by the time you're leaving, and that more and more things were going to be turned over to the Vietnamese?
Yeah, they turned, well, when we would leave, the Army would come in. Like, with the 7th Marines, I think it was the Miracal Division moved in. And then with the 5th Marines, I think the 101st Airborne Division moved into them areas. But then they also had South Vietnamese soldiers. There was a lot of South Vietnamese units.
Right.
So, yeah, we did a lot of different things. We didn't really pal with them. They were more or less a separate unit, but they took casualties. They did their thing.
Right. Now, did you get to go into Saigon or anything like that, or did you mostly just stay at the places where you were based?
Just at the places I was based. Because I moved around, I never got an R&R until I got the Force Logistics Command. And then I was supposed to leave country in April. April 24th was my getting out date. And then,
So did you ever get R&R in Vietnam?
yeah, well, no, I went to Bangkok, Thailand. And that was like March 15th. And when I came back, I had orders to go home.
That's not bad.
And that was Nixon's 1 month early out. Yeah, made my day.
Yeah. Now, what was there to do in Bangkok? I mean, what would people go there for?
Just rest and
A
relaxation.
place where they weren't going to shoot at you.
Yeah,
Yeah. You could stay in an air-conditioned hotel and
yeah.
that kind of thing. All right. Are there particular incidents or events or things that happened to you while you were in Vietnam that tend to come back to you that you haven't mentioned here yet? I got promoted with a combat promotion. Does that mean you're replacing somebody else who gets hit, or just because you did well and so you move up?
Yeah.
All right. Now, did you get any special awards or medals beyond that, or was that all the recognition that you got?
Basically, that's probably the most proudest thing I'm proud of.
Okay. Were there any moments when you were out in the field and that kind of thing where you began to wonder if maybe this was going to be it, or you weren't going to come back or anything like that? Or were you able to maintain a more positive attitude and not have to worry about it?
Well, I think when I was first there, I was kind of wondering,
Mm-hmm.
but you know, I think I didn't want to come back without an arm or something, but
Mm-hmm.
the rest of the stuff didn't scare you too much.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as far as it wasn't something to think about. There was enough work to do,
Mm-hmm.
and we worked hard.
Now, did you ever get to the point where you were so tired it was very hard to do what you were supposed to do?
I was medevac to Da Nang, what they call fever of unknown origin.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, I believe it was exhaustion.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you couldn't get your water and your food and everything. And then something just,
Your body
one
just
of
shuts
your,
down.
one of your
Yeah.
organs said, "You've had enough, buddy."
Okay. Now I need to stop that. All right. Now you talked about, we've been talking about just the physical fatigue and so forth and being out there. And at a certain point, your body just kind of told you to stop. How far into your tour did that happen when you kind of had to get back out of there?
I would say about 2 months.
Okay. So kind of relatively early at that point. Was that sort of like right after that 40 days out there in the jungle?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was after that, and it was, we were back in the field,
Mm-hmm.
and then that could have been, you know, like depression too. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
now you're right back.
To go out and do it again.
Yeah, but our next one wasn't, you know, we were out there maybe 15 days, and
Mm-hmm.
they were back again. And then
Now, how long do you have to spend in a hospital or whatever when they flew you out?
I was there for 2 days,
Okay.
and they gave you some saline solution
Mm-hmm.
and vitamins and, you know, fresh fruit, orange juice,
Right.
this type of thing, and fed you real good. Got to eat some cooked food,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and different things like that.
Now, were you ever injured in combat, or was?
Yeah, I was injured. I was injured one night with what they call a pacifier. When a unit's in trouble,
Mm-hmm.
they bring in other troops.
Right.
We were in a double wing helicopter,
Mm-hmm.
and we took ground fire, and they said they dropped the chopper down and yelled to get out. We were too high off the ground, and I dislocated my hip and got cut real deep.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was laying there, I thought I was shot,
Mm-hmm.
because there was blood running down towards this area of
Mm-hmm.
my body, and it was quite a night.
Now, did they put you back on the helicopter and send you out, or did you have to wait and stay down there on the ground?
We were down there the next morning, and the guys that didn't get hurt came back for us, the guys that were hurt. Then once the daylight was there, we could see what we had to do.
Mm-hmm.
I was back up and around then.
Okay. So they were dislocated. They were able to kind of put you back in, dislocated so they could put it back in position, then you could walk.
Yeah, I was done. I got it back into position before the night was done,
Mm-hmm.
rolling around, because I was trying to find out where our entrance and exit was on the
Right.
road.
Yeah.
And it wasn't,
You couldn't find any.
it was done by a rifle sight.
Mm-hmm.
Scraped, caught in the side pack, scraped up and then flipped me. It was another guy's rifle.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, we kind of gone through your story. You had some R&R time in Bangkok, and you come back. You get your orders to say you're going to ship out. Now, did you have to stay around for a while longer in Logistics Command before you actually left, or did you leave pretty quickly after that?
Well, actually, when I got my orders, they were going to ship me home by boat.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to report to Da Nang. So they threw me on a truck, took me into Da Nang there, and they said, we got to have you loading boats and doing things and getting things ready for troop carrier.
Mm-hmm.
And I was down there, and the officer that was in charge of everything, he said, you don't have enough time to go home by boat. So you're going to work here, for a few days, and we're going to fly you out of here.
You don't have enough time. In other words, you'd still be on the boat when your enlistment was up?
Yeah. The 30-day cut,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I would have still been on the boat. So I worked there for a couple of days, and they got me a flight
Mm-hmm.
to Okinawa. And then I got to spend, or I didn't get to spend, actually, I had to spend a few days there before I could get a flight back to the United States.
Mm-hmm.
But Okinawa was great. They had 24-hour kitchen, all the food you could eat,
Mm-hmm.
eggs, hamburgers, and that was I ate a lot in Okinawa. But I was pretty light at that time too.
Right. Okay. And then, do you then go back to the States? You have to be decommissioned someplace or mustered out?
Yep. We landed in San Bernardino, which is out north of Camp Hell.
Mm-hmm.
Then they brought us in, and they some of them were being transferred to other units, that still had time to go,
Mm-hmm.
and some were getting out. And then they put us in a barracks there, the guys that were getting out.
So how long was it before you got to go home?
Well, I think I landed on the 23rd of March. I landed in California,
Mm-hmm.
and the morning of the 25th, I was out.
All right. Now, were you still committed to the reserves then after that?
I could have joined it, but
Mm-hmm.
the
But you were
only
just
thing
2
I
years
had to
now?
do was turn my paperwork into the reserve
Mm-hmm.
unit, that I was home and where my location was. And that was basically, I was done.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, when you got back, I don't know, what sort of reception did you get when you got home?
Well, family members,
Mm-hmm.
they all come over and see me and stuff.
Now, once you were back, what did you do? Did you go find a job, or what did you do next?
Well, I worked for Dexter Locke just prior to
Mhm.
leaving. And so that was one of the places I had to, expected to go back to work for.
Mm-hmm.
But at that time, they could give you a part-time job or any type of a job, to fulfill their obligations, and they were very slow at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So they wanted me to work 2 days a week or something, and it wasn't panning out. I could draw unemployment from the service
Mm-hmm.
for a month or something, and it would be more than I'd be making there driving into work, which I didn't have a vehicle or anything
Mm-hmm.
yet. And I was using my folks' vehicles to get around, and then overlooking everything. Then I went to work for my dad.
Okay. So you're installing carpet, selling carpet, whatever.
Yeah, that's how I started, was installing carpet.
Okay. And then did you stay in the family business at that point, and that's kind of what you've done, or did you switch to other things later on?
Well, I worked for my dad for about a year, and they got slow.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to work for a company called Chicago Bridge and Iron
Mm-hmm.
out of Chicago, and I worked for them for, I was on my second season when they went on strike. That was a union shop.
Mm-hmm.
And then they ended up going out of business. then I worked for Jerry Cook at Cook's Wrecking and Cannon Wrecking out of Door. Worked for them for a year, and he went down in an airplane crash. And they stopped that company, and then I did odds and ends, and then ended up back working for my dad again. Things picked up. And then I worked from him from 75 or so till 85, and he sold his business and everything, and I got my carpenter's license, or builder's license, and been doing that ever since.
All right. Now, did you have people ask you things about being in Vietnam, or did people just not know? I mean, did you talk much about it to people at all, or just kind of went about your business?
I didn't. And then all of a sudden lately, the last few years I've been talking more and more. I think it's, they're bringing back pride in our military and stuff, and back in the 70s it wasn't popular to.
Yeah, I mean, did you sort of see much sort of evidence of anti-military sentiment or things like that? Did that get expressed toward you at all, or just something you were aware of in the media and that kind of thing?
Well, the media probably, instigated a lot of that stuff, but there was groups in California that didn't like the military, and they were at the airports and different things. They would never, I never got spit on, but I heard that some of them guys did. And that was kind of a letdown, because inside you're so proud after something like that, you're doing all that work. And,
and you're doing it for your country and so
Yep.
forth, and then you get that kind of reception on the other end. Did you find that when you heard stuff about Vietnam or that kind of thing, or people talking about Vietnam veterans and that sort of stuff, do you have the sense that sort of people had the story wrong or kind of didn't get it or whatever, or do you see stuff that seemed fairly accurate as far as you could tell?
Well, I think, if you had duty like down towards the big cities like Saigon, or maybe right in Da Nang or something, there probably could be a lot of dope. And, but I think majority of the servicemen over there never, first of all, you didn't carry around money because it was always in the bank, and you didn't need money. And, if you bought anything, it would be a Coke or a carton of cigarettes or something like that, or, but no, we didn't have any prevalent dope problems. But then, but I could see where certain areas would, an 8 to 4:30 job in Da Nang could be a guy who has a lot of different things going on for him, which I never was a part of any of that.
Right. Yeah, and probably healthier for it too. But yeah, because I think on the whole they determined at some point that the drug abuse rate or whatever among servicemen in Vietnam was basically the same as it was for the general population. Certain things get emphasized in certain ways or whatever just because of how it gets presented. But for the most part, if you were out in the field, and that's pretty consistently what the soldiers will say, if they were out there, you really didn't do that stuff because it wasn't safe and didn't make any sense.
Yeah, you're a close-knit group. Whether you know each other real well or not, you're still a close-knit group.
Right.
You're watching what everybody's doing and what's going on constantly. Because that's your survival.
Yeah. Now, to look back on the whole thing now, how do you think your time in the service wound up affecting you? Did it kind of change the way you viewed the world or dealt with people or anything like that? I mean, you've been just kind of in Byron Center or whatever your whole life before that, and then you're off in Vietnam. What sort of impact did that have on you?
Well, I didn't like it. That's probably why I've always lived in Byron and came back where I was comfortable. But yeah, I got to see the world, and I'm never going to go back. I just would stay right here, close, stay in this country at least.
All right. Well, we're certainly glad that you made it back and made it back in one piece, and also glad that you took the time to come in and talk to me today.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.